here.
No more fucking around. It's Wild Style Radio. Wild Style Radio.
Woo! What is up? Tuesday night.
We got to stop fucking around on a Tuesday night.
Yes, we're not fucking around on a Tuesday night because this is the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show, coming to you live from Salisbury Center Studios in Manassas, Virginia, on the Wild Style Network.
There it is. You can't forget that. So we have two production engineers working on the show tonight. And so, you might be hearing two voices of God coming in to question everything that we're saying. So John's normally here, but Ethan, welcome to the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show.
How we doing?
Not bad. How are you feeling?
Pretty good.
Yeah, we're I don't know. We throw some maybe some obscure rock things to you from time to time. You cool with that?
I'm ready.
We may have to test your knowledge
Wow.
Right.
of a music aficionado.
Okay. I'm ready.
For some reason, our show always starts with the no more fucking around. For 3 years, that's happening, and I don't know why. Does Jess get that? Does
Nope.
Tribe Called Jess? Does she get? Is she
No,
fucking
but she gets a
around?
graphic package.
Oh wow! Yeah, there you go, Ethan. You're gonna have to contend with this jealousy between shows.
All right.
But I don't think that we're the fucking around types.
No?
I don't. Maybe the boss does.
I mean, it's time to get serious when we come on the air, though.
I guess so. Are you right? Laying down low, baby.
That's right.
All right. Well, happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday, my friend.
Yeah.
Feels like summer finally.
Oh man, I know. Feels like I've recovered from the merry, merry month of May.
Merry, merry month of May.
Yeah.
That's a good. Yeah, I'm still a little in a haze. It could be the Canadian wildfires, but yeah, it was quite the month.
We had a hell of a run. We went. I feel like when we were doing our shows earlier in the year, we veered away from like discussing our live music events and kind of got into a lot of interviews.
We did, yeah.
Actually, and then all of a sudden it just blew up. It just blew the fuck up, and then there we are, like live show after live show after live show, and it wasn't our choosing. It was just when everything dropped.
No, it's just the way the concert calendar fell in this area, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't remember, I mean, any time hitting this as many shows as we hit this month.
Right.
In all of our careers or history of going to live shows.
Absolutely. All right, so we want to talk about that because when we go out and about, we get, how was that show? If we had like a segment right now, we could call it, how was that show?
That's right.
And we have a lot to talk about.
We do.
So when we've talked about this all month long, but we have not talked about this officially. So you're seeing spontaneous conversation between Kevin and I on how was that show? All right, so
Which one you want to start with?
we'll start at the beginning of May.
Yeah.
LA Guns here
Yes.
in Leesburg, Virginia. And that really kind of kicked things off for us at a small venue here in the area.
Yeah, and it was, it was a hell of a start, too, because, first time seeing Tracy Guns back with Phil Lewis.
Yes.
And the, LA Guns, as most of it was originally constituted when they started to break big. And it was an amazing show.
It was an amazing show. And our production engineer, John, who's like out there talking, you were doing sound for LA Guns at that show.
Yeah, I was on monitors. That was a good show. That was a really good show.
I remember you texted me and said that, like, this shit is legit.
They were incredible.
Yeah.
How were they? Did they have egos?
Yeah, like.
Problem is they all blur together at this point. It's like they only really stand out if they're complete assholes, and I don't remember them as being in that category. So they were pleasant.
Good guys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Other
of
people
course.
on the other side, I could probably tell you some stories, but they were good.
Yeah. I think that they looked great. They sounded great. They had a good repertoire in their set list, a good diverse mix of new and old.
Yep.
So some classics that they threw out there. It was, well, I think like the bend for me in terms of that show was where it moves into the next weekend. And I wouldn't understand the reason why, because it gets into our next group of stories and how was that show. Was M3 Rock Festival.
Yeah.
And we have seen LA Guns many times on the M3 Rock Festival.
Yeah.
But somehow they were not on the M3 Rock Festival and playing Tally Ho in Leesburg the night before.
That was a little surprising because we've gone to a lot of shows on the front end and the back end of M3.
Right.
I'm thinking Faster Pussycat, Lita Ford.
Yep.
Or where we saw them either at M3 and then 7 days later, they're suddenly at Tally Ho.
Exactly.
So, certainly surprising. I mean, M3 was a great bill.
Yes.
Probably one of the best in recent years, in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
Yeah.
But had LA Guns been on that,
Right. I don't know why they weren't.
it would have been outstanding.
I know. So maybe the LA Guns had a tour scheduled before M3 was booked. M3 was booked kind of late.
Yeah.
That's just speculation on my part, though.
Yep.
I don't know, but it was surprising that because they've done so well as part of the M3 lineup
Yep.
over so many years.
Yeah, whether it's LA Guns or Riley's LA Guns or the different incarnations between the two bands when they've kind of fractured apart for a bit. But yeah, always been good.
All right, well, let's get to the M3 Rock Festival, the amazing M3 Rock Festival. So we can kind of start in chronological order, and we'll start with an interview that if you have not watched it yet, you need to watch it. That's with John Allen of Child's Play that we were able to, speak with after his performance, which was another great Child's Play performance that afternoon.
Yeah, kicked it off with obviously the night before Sebastian Bach and his solo band performed, but for us, we only went to Saturday and Sunday.
Yep.
And yeah, Child's Play, long-time local band, been phenomenal. It was great to get to chat with John Allen and kind of talk a little bit about their history and reminisced on a couple of different stories from different experiences we had seeing them. And yeah, it was a great interview.
It was a great interview, and he was just the nicest person to speak to, and is really appreciative of his time at M3.
Yep.
And the sets that he's playing there, and really they're only playing twice a year. That's one of obviously that's 50% of it all.
Right.
So that's happening at that May festival, and then in and around Christmas they do a Baltimore show, and I would like to see more of them. And John, if you're listening and you're following up with all this conversation, we'd love to have you here at the Salisbury Center.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But the show of shows, I felt like the show, except for our friend Spread Eagle, they were fantastic. And I got to give them all the love in the world. But what was amazing about the M3 Rock Festival was Saturday night and David Lee Roth. And I get a lot of, how was that show? Like David Lee Roth specifically. So you want to go with that? You want to run with that?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting the day after, because there were tons of videos circulating on social media. I know we talked before the performance. What are we going to get?
What are we going to get? Because there was nothing before that performance. There's nothing to compare it to. No set lists out there. He had not played in 5 years.
Right.
So God knows what was going to show up.
Yeah, it's like, were we going to get a steady dose of solo Dave with a couple Van Halen tunes sprinkled in, or how was he going to sound because he retired?
Right.
After I think the last thing was his Vegas residency.
Yep.
And just kind of gave it up. And, there were all the rumors swirling of an Eddie Van Halen tribute with, potentially some of the original members all getting back together, Sammy in, Sammy out, Dave in, Dave out. Never really happened. So didn't know what we were going to get.
We did, but we got something I found to be personally amazing. I think that was, so first I guess we'll speak to the set list. At least I will speak to the set list, which was largely an old Van Halen set list. So really anything dating from 1984 back, no solo Dave.
Yep.
I felt like I was watching an old Van Halen show. Now, of course, Eddie and Alex and Michael weren't there, but the musicianship playing those Van Halen songs, the musicians that he hired for that show was fantastic. But where I get to, and where I was getting questions from others that were asking me about that show, well, how were the vocals?
Right.
And what were the vocals? And he did something that I really appreciated. We talk about this with backing tracks and what musicians will do now to physically hold together a good, strong vocal performance, which is throw in a lot of recorded music back behind them, or, hide backup singers, backstage. Dave did not do that. He had clear and obvious live backup singers that he made a vivid part of the show and part of the party. And I love that. I love that he did not hide the fact that it was a group vocal performance.
Yep. And it was, for his age, it was classic Dave.
It was.
He wasn't doing the jumps. He, obviously he wasn't doing all the screams and the things that he did when we were younger.
Right.
The backup singers took a lot of that.
Right.
And, but he was the ultimate frontman, as he's always been.
Great Van Halen. I don't even know. I would call them deep tracks, because we saw songs that we had never seen before. At least I'd never seen before live, such as Romeo Delight. What a bitchin', ragin', party, hard-hitting song.
Yep.
And I feel like I got a taste of what that would have been like to see that in 1979.
Yep.
When I did not see it.
Yeah, and the Cradle Will Rock. I mean, stuff that I don't even know that they were playing all that much when he was still in Van Halen.
Exactly.
And love the deep tracks. And we thought it was a one-off, and now it looks like he's doing a little bit of a tour too. So
Yep.
So
and that was announced right afterwards.
Yep.
So, and I also like just the opening. They opened with Panama, which just smacked you in the face with the tone of the night. And when it was finished, and he finished with Jump, I would have finished with a different song, but like that's his biggest song, so that's understandable. But the crowd was a raging, and yelling and screaming, and it was a full-on party that night.
Yeah,
So,
and there were some mixed comments, the next day.
Yeah.
Some folks didn't like that.
Yeah.
But like we talked about, it was 100% live.
Uh-huh.
The guitar player, I don't really know his name. I don't think he's, known.
No.
And, across the circles, but he was on point too. I mean, he sounded good. The whole band, they all sounded good, and I was shocked because it's not what I was expecting was going to come out. So, had that been the end of the festival,
right,
would have been cool.
would have been a hell of a note to close on. All right, so Ethan, we're going to quiz you. Do you know any Van Halen? You a Van Halen fan?
I am a big Van Halen guy.
Are you really? Okay. And I mean, the question we typically get is Sammy or Dave.
I'm gonna have to say Dave.
Oh, okay. We didn't like peer pressure you into that with us past conversation, did we? All right.
No, I do like Sammy stuff. I think he's got some good stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Dave overall, I think he has to take it.
Right.
What do you guys?
That's where we stand. We are fans of both singers, but to me, we've talked about this. They're two different bands. I almost wish, and I like it when bands do this when they rename themselves. I wish that Van Halen was Van Halen with David Lee Roth, and then Sammy Hagar. People have named it Van Hagar, as a nickname, but that's just that. I wish they would have called it something else because it's a great band, but it's a different band. So that's my personal take
I'm
on
just
that one.
kind of looking through here. Yeah, some of the other tunes he rolled out. Drop Dead Legs.
Yes. Oh, how could I forget that?
Yep. Unchained.
Yes.
I thought those days were long gone where you would hear him do that live.
Drop Dead Legs was fantastic.
Yeah. Everybody Wants Some. I mean, it was just old school Van Halen hit after hit after hit. And
the backup singers weren't traditional backup singers that weren't just there with good voices, standing 10 feet off the microphone. They were a part of it. They were a part of that gig. And they did not overtake Dave. You knew when Dave was singing. You knew when Dave had the lead. And he is him. He's one of the best frontmen of all time. And he went out there in his 70s after not playing in 5 years and showed it, proved it.
Yep.
So God bless you, David Lee Roth. That was a fantastic show. Thank you so much for saving the M3 Rock Festival.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then we got to kick off the next day with, you mentioned it already, our friends from Spread Eagle.
Man, they were great.
They were phenomenal, early in the set, early in the day's agenda, and not a lot of people there, which was unfortunate because they had a killer 6-song set, and little plug for those guys. They're going to be here on June the 20th, coming back to the Salisbury Center for the second time. And if you haven't gotten your tickets, go to getwild.com and pick up a ticket.
Absolutely. And so they played a song, like if you're looking for some Spread Eagle tunes to listen to, one of my favorites, Devil's Road. I wasn't expecting to put that in their set list, and they did.
Right.
I was thrilled that they did. And of course, one of their newer songs, Sound of Speed, both are great snippets that are out there that we have on our social media. So if you want to get a little taste of that band, those guys are on point. Like they've come back and they're advertising, I believe it's the 35th year of the band. And so that's what they're selling as a part of this tour, this local tour that they're putting together. But you would never know it. I mean, those guys are in shape and they play aggressive music and they play it really well.
Yep, absolutely. And we got to chat with them after their set. And that's up too. So go check that out. And like I said, get a ticket and come on out here on June the 20th.
Great conversation with those guys. And thank you to we had a quasi-production man, Eric Magruder. So if he's listening, he was the cameraman, did some camera work on those interviews backstage. So thank you for joining us and helping us with that, Eric. All right, so in terms of how was that show, to shift gears, I'm sticking with M3. We haven't left M3 yet.
Right.
All right, so I'm going to jump to Warren DeMartini and Stephen Pearcy calling themselves that, right? Not necessarily Rat, but it was a Rat show, very obviously. Yeah,
for sure. And it was like those guys had never been apart.
Right.
It was so tight.
Yeah.
Warren was amazing.
Great to see
and obviously Carlos Cavaza is also the other guitar player in Stephen Pearcy's band right now, and Blas Elias on drums. So short of getting those original members of Rat that are still around back together, I think that's the closest thing we get to a Rat reunion.
Easily.
And it was phenomenal.
Right. So okay, I'm gonna be just a little bit of a bitch here, and like you talk about a little bitch topic with Warren. So Warren looked like a college professor when he was playing. It was a very different look from the shirt he was selling.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which is him totally Rat glammed out.
Yep.
With like saber tooth earrings and thick, heavy eyeliner and teased out hair. And then he comes up and he's like so academic looking. He had like a nice coat on and then a scarf. You know, he looked like he was about to give a lecture.
And he did.
And he did. I was going to say, in like some old school, he sounded great. So,
Yeah.
like, you know, in terms of appearances,
For sure.
that was just what I wasn't expecting. But I will say that I wish, like watching that show, they mixed up their set list. I wish that Warren would have been there. That made me wish that he was there when they did the 40th anniversary, excuse me, of Out of the Cellar last year.
Yep.
That I really made me miss that because he just would have sounded great, you know, back with Stephen Pearcy.
Yep. Yeah. And, you know, doing, with the exception of Round and Round, the Out of the Cellar cover to cover.
Right.
You know, and they played a bunch off of that, and obviously
Absolutely.
Invasion of Your Privacy.
Right.
So it was great, but I agree. That would have made that portion of last year's show even better.
Great mix of Rat tunes in that set list on Sunday night to close the M3 Rock Festival.
Yep.
But that's my only kind of takeaway. Really, I don't care how Warren looked. He just sounded great. That's the most important thing, right? That's really what I cared about. But like, it just made me want him there for. I just want him to play all of Out of the Cellar again. Like I wanted to see that one more time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, obviously, Great White performed, and Ace Frehley was there. You know, what I saw of that set was pretty good. But
sometimes you need to recover.
Sometimes you do. You need a little power nap. But and unfortunately, because we were meeting with the Spread Eagle guys, you know, we missed most of Lita Ford.
We did. That was a bummer.
You know, and she always puts on a great show, but we caught the very tail end of that. So.
And we would have liked to talk to you, Lita. We tried. We really tried. So, like, if you're somehow hearing this and you're like, damn, I wish I would have talked to those guys, blame your management because we really tried to get to you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. First year we got to go with some press passes and get to talk to guys, the different artists. So hopefully next year, which I think, you know, we can swing back into that.
Yeah.
After, I think we're going to chat a little bit about Boardwalk Rock Festival because it sounds like M3 is feeling a little bit of pressure now.
Yeah, the post-show survey with that.
Yes.
one. Yeah, so like right. So I'm sure that anyone can do this post-show survey, and I'm glad that they were taking a look at who is performing at the M3 Rock Festival because it is aging.
Sure.
And it needs a refreshment. I would agree with that. And there's a lot of great rock acts that we talk about. We say, you know, the show always goes back to the Kicks. Kicks isn't playing there anymore. It's a great example. But then if it's not going to Kicks, it's going to Dirty Honey. Dirty Honey to me is born for the M3 Rock Festival.
Absolutely.
So please get them there. Whoever the persons are who are doing that booking, that should make some serious consideration, as well as Dorothy. I would go with the band Feel that we saw opening for
they
Dirty
were
Honey.
awesome.
Right, yeah. Some great newer acts that are out there that certainly...
Rival Sons.
Rival Sons, absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah. So anyway, one other thing before we leave N3, I got to give a shout out because we had a chance meeting, which was fantastic, with another DJ, Mark Striegel. From Sirius XM.
Yes. That was cool. He
That
was
was.
kind of doing some man on the street interviews, and we were running our gear out to the car and got to chat with him. And yeah, he is following the show now, I think, and we're
turns out
following him.
He's a
And
big fan of rock podcasts.
Yeah.
So like he was very interested in our podcast. He was interested in our interviews, and like he was just a great guy to talk to. And we also, of course, he helped host the show, so he was introducing bands all along. So.
Yes.
So shout out to you, Mark. It was great meeting you.
absolutely.
All right, so next we move on to another great moment in that week, which was Metallica at Lane Stadium in Blacksburg. So we took a day to rest after the M3 Rock
Right.
Festival. At least I did. Did you? You went to work. Didn't you?
I worked.
I did not work. I did not do that shit. I took a day to rest.
Yeah.
And then we road trip down. Again, you can find this on all of our socials because we dropped some clips along the way as we were doing this.
Little nuggets.
Little nuggets out there to let you know where everybody was, just for check-ins. And then
Yep.
boom, we found ourselves in Lane Stadium. Like, you know the most overused word to me in like any media situation, whether it's like a sports interview or a political interview, like whatever it is, surreal.
Right.
Like, you're not going to hear that shit come out of my mouth. Like, what was it like to see Metallica at Lane Stadium? It was surreal. What the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was an experience. And as two Virginia Tech alums and fans of Metallica that were listening to Metallica when
Right.
we were there,
Right.
when most people there were not listening to them, and then being able to experience that, you know, and obviously the whole thing with Enter Sandman and how the
Yeah.
football team adopted the song.
With the rise of, like, I mean, we'll get a little sports talk here. We need Smitty here. Like, that was like coincided with the rise of Michael Vick, right? Like the whole
did,
the
yeah.
Virginia Tech program for us, and
Yep.
and like you're saying, we were Metallica fans when it was nerdy to be a Metallica fan, and the frat houses did not play it. You
Yeah.
know, like it was all the thrash metal and metal dudes that were only listening to that. All of a sudden,
Turn that shit off.
right.
That sucks.
Then the football team has it, and they're
Yeah.
coming in the stadium as the program's like taking off and playing for a national championship.
Yeah, and so what I think they said, I think it started in 2005, so we were long gone.
Oh,
I
that
think
was
even
before
Michael Vick was gone.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know that. I thought it was-
Or 2000, which would have been right on the tail
That's
end of
what I
his.
thought, yeah.
Because it was either the 20th or the 25th anniversary of when they started
I
with
didn't
Enter
mean to,
Sandman.
didn't mean to throw a sports factoid at you. Like,
Oh, no, it's all
we
good.
Do our homework for that one.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, obviously the Black Album hit,
Yes,
you know,
it was released when we were there.
we were there.
when you
and-
were doing radio.
Yes.
I think I
and-
was done with radio by that point, but you were still doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what, 92? And that exploded them into the massive stars that they are now. But, you know, we were there. A Justice for All had just come out when we were freshmen there. So to be able to go to that show and experience that, you know, could call it surreal or
It was
whatever term you want to
extremely-
use.
I will use the word sentimental, which might be more descriptive.
Yeah.
Like it was very nostalgic and very sentimental and very special for us personally.
Yep.
But I think a lot of the fans that we were sitting with probably felt the same way because we have our story, but there's probably another story for another group of people when they first heard Enter Sandman and they were watching Virginia Tech in and around that time, and they could have those types of memories too, even though
Sure.
they were different than ours.
So, yeah, I think, you know, and it was obvious it was a different crowd.
Yes.
It wasn't
It
like
wasn't
a
thrash
ravenous
metal.
thrash Metallica crowd
Yes.
that, like we saw when we'll get to a little bit later last week, you know, but you could tell in the one point in the show when James is like, hey, how many of you, is this your first Metallica show?
Right.
And, you know,
It was a hell of a lot
it
of
was
people.
like, I'd say at least 75-80% of everyone, and it was packed. It was, you know, that holds 60-something thousand for football, and,
Sure.
and the entire field was covered.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the exact numbers were, but people were saying 80,000, 90,000. It was a lot of people.
It was a lot of
and there were a lot of arms that went up that
Yes.
this was the first Metallica show.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that's why most of you are sitting on your asses the whole night, except the beginning and the end. Or we're wearing Ride the Lightning t-shirts and didn't realize the first 3 songs they played came off of that album, that the t-shirt you were wearing.
Right.
So it was different for
'Cause
sure.
We did a street interview basically of we were centered it around Sandman, obviously, because
Right.
that's the song there that really like connects with people, obviously, in the football team. So the basic question was, when is Enter Sandman going to be played in the
Yep.
set list? And they've been keeping a consistent set list with some mix-ups, some
Yep.
ins and outs, you know. And we were watching that, and I'm not one. I don't like to watch set lists before I like to be surprised.
Sure.
You know, so like I tend to not look, but I did look for this one just because I was curious, because I thought it could change.
Yeah.
And that's really kind of what we were asking people. We were going around the lot, and there was a lot of mixed reaction to that. So
There
people
were.
were expecting, and
Yeah.
there was that tidbit where they played a backing track of Sandman
Mm-hmm.
starting, where you thought that they may actually start the show with that song.
Right.
And then they kicked. So it was like everybody was up, everybody bit into that
Yep.
recorded, you know, playing of the intro to that song, and then it went into Creeping Death.
Yep.
And then you like saw a lot of people want to be excited, but then they just dropped.
And they're like, oh.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, great show.
beautiful weather.
It was
Stunning.
surprisingly
Right,
for
'cause it
Bleaksburg.
rains a hell of a lot in Blacksburg,
Mm-hmm.
so like that was stunning. And I always get asked, did the stadium shake?
it was hard to tell because everybody was jumping.
Right? We were shaking along with it.
So it was shaking.
But it always shakes.
It does for every football game. Now, obviously, I think it was a bit more, they put the seismographs up, especially like the Saturday night game against Notre Dame or whatever. You'll see that pop out.
Right.
And it shows there's seismic activity when they play Enter Sandman.
Right.
So it's not necessarily a big deal, but the media grabbed that and ran with it because
absolutely.
Clearly they didn't know. But
and it's an acknowledgement, that
Yeah.
it was also, there was never been any music act in Lane Stadium.
Nope,
in
first
Blacksburg. I love the fact that I cannot believe that a thrash metal band, and I get back to that like with the popularity of Sandman and it kind of being, for lack of better words, a pop song that a lot of people know. Metallica is one of the big four, one of the original big four thrash metal, and I won't say they invented it, but they certainly made it into the behemoth that it was and it has moved into and put thrash metal on the map. And
absolutely,
you could argue that, they were the biggest of the big four. Some people will. I know you're not going to say that, but
well, they're clearly the biggest. I mean, they've sold the most albums. They've obviously lasted longer than most of the other three, with the exception of Anthrax and Megadeth. They're still kicking around,
Sure.
but Slayer's now back on the scene.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of commercial success, musically, you can argue. Plenty will argue that they're not thrash anymore.
Right.
So, but yeah, they are one of the four on the Mount Rushmore of thrash.
Easily. When I'm with, I feel like that's what you get in a stadium. It's amazing that a thrash metal act that had no video airplay, it had really for the first several albums, they had singles that were released but really received no significant airplay, that they are still a stadium act.
Yeah.
In a time when there's not many rock stadium acts left.
That is true.
It's amazing.
They were, and we're going to be talking about alternative music a little bit later in the show, but they were a true alternative act.
Yeah.
That basically really didn't give a fuck.
Right.
About doing videos or doing, regular radio.
Right.
MTV was starting to kind of spin up.
Right.
But, they made their name off of recording and touring.
Yep, exactly.
And blowing away the headliners that would take them out and, until they became headliners.
Absolutely.
So,
all right.
The old school way.
All right. Well, congratulations, Metallica. It was a fantastic show. And if you were at Lane Stadium, you know how special it was.
Absolutely.
All right. So the next show in May, we're still rolling down the line.
That's right.
All right. So Sasanta?
Yes.
Yeah, Sasanta. So, which leads us really almost into Boardwalk Rock.
Right.
We have to kind of make mention of that because Sasanta happened on the same, and we'll get to who the bands who are in Sasanta is the title of the tour that Kevin and I went to, and that was a one-nighter on a Sunday night. We needed to kind of lick our wounds and recover, after all this travel, to get to something like that. But we really wanted to get to the Boardwalk Rock Festival, which is in the area, was in Ocean City, Maryland, which had some great acts. Originally, that was where Motley Crue and Def Leppard were landing on a Saturday night. Then Motley bagged out, replaced by Alice in Chains, which would have been amazing, which was replaced by Rob Zombie. So, whoever was Johnny on the spot in terms of replacing acts in the Boardwalk Rock Festival, kudos to you. Hailstorm was there.
Yep.
That's another one that would be great for the M3
Absolutely.
Rock Festival.
Yeah.
That we didn't mention earlier.
Yeah, so that was sort of the point, right? Because like we mentioned, M3 sent out a survey and it was clear because there were thousands of people at this festival.
Right.
And, hearing from a lot of our friends that were there that it was a great show and a little difficult at times to get from one stage to the next.
Right.
But it was a much more diverse music environment.
Yes.
And it was a nice mix of 80s, 90s, 2000 rock bands.
Sure.
And, anywhere from Mammoth, WVH, so one of the new young guns that's out there was there.
Right.
Puddle of Mud, 3 Days Grace, Alice in Chains, Brett Michaels, and our good friend Pete Evick. Those guys were there.
Fantastic.
Candlebox,
I know. I was happy for
So,
Pete.
yeah.
And then, he brought his son up. That must be thrilling for not only Gavin, his son, Gavin Evick, but Pete himself. I'm
Yep.
sure like they were as high could be playing to a crowd that size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just a great lineup and an eclectic lineup. So a little something for just about anybody that's into rock music.
Sure.
And then M3 sent this survey out right after that.
Right.
So it's
Right.
and asking, what would you think about this band coming in future shows or this band? And it was obvious that they're feeling a little bit of pressure from Boardwalk Rock.
Yes.
Because a lot of the same type bands that were listed and performed there were part of that survey. So I think both can coexist, and it would be phenomenal to just turn that into, a real huge May rock month
Absolutely.
locally in this area.
I would love to see it. Would love to see it. But getting back to Sasanta, so we have 3 acts there.
Yep.
Really, this is a celebration of Maynard James Keenan from Tool.
Yep.
And so 2 of his side projects, Pucifer and A Perfect Circle. So he was playing with both of those bands, who then in turn played with Primus. In terms of the production of this show, I think
Yep.
that's what makes it very special. So those bands played intermittently between one another, so there was no full breakdown of one band to bring the next band on to play
Yep.
full sets. They would play 3 or 4 songs, take turns moving back and forth from the stage. There were 3 drum risers, across the back drum stage area.
Yep.
And that was pretty amazing to watch. And I love the approach, I have to say. I love the mix because those sets really kind of complemented each other
They
between
did.
the styles of
Yeah.
those 3 bands.
Absolutely. And, points in times when all 3 drummers were performing at the same time. And particularly at the end, everybody came out at the end, So it was kind of party gras style, like Bret Michaels does,
Yep.
which is definitely refreshing because you're getting a little bit of everything mixed in and the special guests come out and all of that. So, I agree. I thought that was a fun way for those 3 bands to play off of each other and with each other and there was only one little brief 10-minute intermission. So
Right.
it was I think the entire set list was almost 30 songs.
Exactly. Yes.
And, and it was just a great night of music.
Maynard sound excellent. So if you're hearing 61, you're like, oh my God, what does that guy sound like? Can he pull it off? The answer is yes, very easily. Yes, same with Les Claypool. Not only obviously his singing's not what he's known for, but it's his playing. And so he's still pulling off great Primus tunes and almost doing jams, prolonged jams on Primus tunes out there. And so, it was just exciting to watch the musicianship that was out there. And my biggest takeaway from that show was, Maynard kind of popping out at the end, and people were acknowledging his birthday, but he just kind of did say, everybody's getting older and go see live music as much as you can.
Yep.
And we were definitely following his wise words last month.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is obviously we've talked about it previously on the show and his aversion and wanting you to be in the moment with the music.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
No cell
I won't
phones.
say, no cell phones. I don't want your phones out.
Right.
So they did an announcement over the PA before the show started, and they launched the event with a video saying the same thing.
Yep.
And then they played the first tune, and then he said, "Put your fucking phone away."
Yeah.
Because if we see you with it, we're kicking you out.
Yeah.
Be in the moment with us.
Yeah.
And said, you'll have a chance at the end to take pictures and video and whatever you want.
Right.
And which he did. And, I saw a couple people sneaking
Sure.
pictures and videos, but
Sure.
everybody was in it. And
Yeah.
we've talked about it, and I like the fact that you didn't have somebody standing in front of you the whole time holding their camera up,
Right.
blocking your vision.
Right.
And it was phenomenal night.
Obviously, we take posts, right? You can see them in our social media. It's very obvious. But I feel like we practice an etiquette to it. I feel like we're appropriate with it. We're usually popping off a couple pictures and maybe a segment of a song
Yep.
for video just to share with people, just to kind of recognize that it's there. But outside of that, there are people that will literally record the entire performance, not even a song, but the entire performance, And so I do really think that they're missing something
For sure.
by not being involved with the live energy, of those concert environments.
I agree.
All right, but we did miss before Sasanta. I don't know how I forgot this. I went back and scrolled through my roll to make sure we didn't miss anything. We did. We missed AC/DC.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's true.
Then there's that
Yeah.
at Northwest Stadium.
Yep.
So another aging stadium act.
Yeah. And they were great. I mean, it started with Pretty Reckless.
Who we're huge fans of. Another great
Yep.
band for M3.
Yep. And, I think they won over some fans because there were a lot of people that didn't probably know them at all.
Yeah.
Or any of their music. And they put on a great show, great warm up act. And, you could see people were, by the end of their set, were getting into their music. And so hopefully, another band. Let's get Taylor and the guys at M3 as well. 'Cause
Right.
They would kill it there.
Angus held up. Angus Young, playing difficult stuff and being Angus because he's known for his, his so for lack of better words, dance performance as he's bouncing all over the
Right.
stage, whatever he's doing. That high energy, strut that he has or skip step. Was there. Wasn't what it used to be, but it was there. I mean, he still wants to bring it to the audience. He's in it to win it, and the songs are solid.
Well, he is only 70.
I know.
So,
I know.
but what I couldn't
In a
and-
schoolboy outfit at 70 years old.
and we talked about it. I always assumed Brian Johnson was younger than Angus.
Yeah.
And he's actually 77.
Yes.
So, and he sounded good.
Yeah.
Obviously, no one wins against Father Time.
Right.
But, I mean, he sounded on point, and especially with the health issues he had that prevented him from touring a few years back. So
Sure.
to be able to get through that, and we saw him at the Taylor Hawkins tribute on that pay-per-view or on that live stream.
Sure.
And, sounded good.
Right.
But yeah, they were great. And it had been since 1988 since I'd seen them, and I know.
It was my first time.
Yeah.
That's
So-
of everything that I've seen and all the shows that I've seen, that was my first time with AC/DC.
Yep.
So
Oh, can't believe we forgot that one.
I know, right? I know. Like I was like, there's something big in the middle that we just kind of skipped over.
Yep.
But then we finished the month with another Metallica show here in Washington, D.C.,
Yep.
away from Blacksburg. We talked about Metallica, but in terms of how was this show, I think the bigger question is, how does it compare with the Blacksburg show? I would get that question a lot.
Yeah, and like I said, that was a different experience. The Metallica performance, they're just always solid. Mm-hmm. And, I think it was the same. Obviously, there was that heightened anticipation for Enter Sandman, and they teased it a little bit and finished with it. But, what I appreciated was the fact that they threw in one or two really deep tracks. They
That's
mixed
where I was
up the
gonna go.
set list.
Yes.
And, they were 100% as awesome as they usually are from a performance standpoint. But to see them perform Leper Messiah,
That's where I was going to go. That's the standout for me in that show.
that was,
I feel like
that put it, in my opinion, I mean, I can't say one was better than the other, but I love the fact that, there was a song that they've only played, and I went back and looked it up on setlist.fm. They've only played that song 135 times in the entirety of their touring
over
career.
nearly 40 years.
Where they've got other tunes they're playing 1,600, 2,000 times, and that one comes out. And usually it only comes out on the back-to-back, the no repeat weekend shows anymore.
Right.
Most recently. So for them to pull that one out of the hat, I thought maybe jump in the fire or hit the lights or something, but that was a curveball.
It was a stunner for me. So I remember when the opening riff kind of kicked in, I did a double take. I'm like, am I really hearing that right? Wasn't expecting to hear that song. I think we sound like old metalheads when we talk about it, because there were definitely a lot of people around us who were like, what the hell is that song? And then there we are singing it loud and proud. And it made me, I don't think Metallica would ever do it because they have too many hits more recently to do something like this, and they're selling out stadiums. But I would love to hear Master Puppets in its entirety.
Yep.
I would love it if they would do something like that, even on a small scale.
Well, now they're hitting the 40th anniversary of some of these albums, but yeah, I mean, I couldn't see them doing that. Maybe they could do it in a portion of a no repeat weekend show.
Right.
And then you got time and space to put all the other stuff in. But
Right. Yeah.
it would be awesome.
Yeah.
Or even a few more songs off of Justice that 'cause they hardly ever touch any of that anymore.
I know. And that's a shame. It's a fantastic album. We did a Metallica Bottoms Up. We're about to go into a Bottoms Up. We did a Metallica Bottoms Up, not only with us, but a few local bands that came through that were, because I think every band's inspired by Metallica. So it's easy to speak to Metallica albums. And so when we do Bottoms Up, we're typically comparing albums and doing our least favorite, probably even Strong Language, because we like pretty much all the albums that we're typically moving through, to our most preferred albums, maybe least preferred to most preferred. We'll talk about it that way. And you can go back and find that in our playlist and do comparisons with our Metallica conversations that we've had in the past.
Right.
Yeah, very cool. That was it, man. That was a month. What do you think of that, fellas? Like, how about that? We just talked for 45 minutes about shows in May because we had not done that at all on the Stand Up and Shout Rock Show for an entire month. We're saving that for you, Ethan, since you're new here tonight.
Thank you so much.
Did you recognize, what bands did you recognize in that conference? You're a young pup, for those that can't see you. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to ask, but...
I was at the Metallica show in Washington.
Oh, and you were at the DC show?
Yeah.
Nice.
It was a good show.
Yeah, all right. Where were you for that show?
I was seated. I was up top.
Okay.
But you got to see everything from up there with their whole big snake pit.
Absolutely. So what stood out for you in that show? What stood out for you?
Yes,
that lighting was
my
vicious.
trade. Yeah, the lighting. Their production is just excellent. I think.
I heard it was 77 trucks.
Something like that. Some absurd number.
Yeah.
They've really refined their production too, because it used to be like a couple of times we saw them at MCI Center or Capital One Arena, whatever. You were familiar with it but they had the end around part. But a lot of they would play the backing tracks into a song up to a point, and it was like an abrupt stop,
right?
And then they would go live with it,
right?
And they still do that a little bit, but it's much more. It flows much better,
right.
and I think it's a good lead in. It lets them take a little bit of a break and catch their wind or whatever, and then hit that next tune.
All right, so y'all ready for this? So we had a dude that I would say is like a part-time Metallica fan, like in our pack, and you were talking about stadium shows, and we were coming out of Northwest Stadium, and he was like the only other stadium show that I've seen here was Taylor Swift, and so like I just couldn't resist, right? Like, how does that compare to Taylor Swift? And I'm watching
Mariah Carey, man.
This is like this is like midnight. You know what I mean? People got good buzzes on. People are just like amped coming out of Metallica, also worn down at the same time, and traffic's like backed up to hell. And he was like weighing pros and cons, but then ultimately looked up and was like, well, Taylor had a better performance, and she like got on a surfboard and flew out over the crowd. And I thought Kevin was gonna fucking explode. I thought Kevin was gonna punch somebody, if not him. And then what happened with Kevin? He went and got a plate of Cheez-Its, because we had Cheez-Its. And then he was done with that conversation, and he just fucking left. He went down and watched traffic, like, back up, and, like, was gone for, like a half hour. And I was like, what happened to Kevin? And then, like, we walked down and found Kevin, away from this other dude, and I was like, he couldn't take it anymore. Kevin was done. He would rather eat Cheez-Its. He'd rather eat Cheez-Its and watch traffic than watch this guy talk about Taylor Swift.
Probably go play in traffic instead of hearing that.
Almost laid down in it.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, John.
No, I was going to say, I remember when Metallica first started doing that new setup with that whole circle stage, I felt like everything I saw on Reddit was nothing but posts about the sound being an issue. And I noticed, at least from the Virginia Tech, and again, I'm not the hugest follower of Metallica. Like, I love Metallica, but I don't pay attention to what the shows look like from city to city. I've noticed that they've changed the speaker arrangements around tremendously.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Where they used to be on the towers, but now they have all those guide wires going from tower to tower, and the whole array is moved completely around. So I'm curious if you were part of any of the shows where they've had the sound issues with that new stage compared to how it sounded in DC.
So definitely seen them a couple times,
I thought like
in the round.
If in terms of this was not in the round, but the last time I saw them was in Baltimore. Were you at the
Right.
Baltimore
Yeah,
show?
we were at that one. Yeah.
And I didn't think the sound was great at that show.
It was not great, but yeah, it was on the stage was on the far end from
Yeah.
where we were at, and yeah, so I think they had the arrays and the delay arrays.
Right.
But yeah, that wasn't the best sound of any of the shows I've been to.
But when we went, the last time we saw them in the round that I remember was 2009, and that was Death Magnetic, and that was inside, so that wasn't outside in a stadium. So I think it was probably easier to manage the sound there, and I did like it there. I don't remember that being bad.
Yeah,
Sure.
no,
I mean,
it
indoor
was
stuff-
loud.
It was.
It's a lot
exactly.
easier because the weather plays a big difference in the way the sound travels.
Right.
And when the humidity starts spiking up, it definitely throws those low frequencies around completely different than what it would be in a cooler day.
Right.
Yeah.
But I remember like, when I first started seeing that new circle set up with the snake pit in the center. I think all the speakers were on those individual towers, and now it looks like those towers are all like video pillars, I guess now.
So, and I think it depends, right? Because I don't know that they had them spread out at Lane Stadium, but I think that was a limitation of the size of the stadium. Because I think the speakers were in the towers at that show.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah. So Ethan, was this the first time you saw Metallica?
Yes, this was my first time.
So you had to raise your hand when they did the.
I raised both hands.
Nice, nice. You committed. You fully committed.
Oh, yeah.
To that experience. Yeah. So what'd you think of the beach balls on Seek and Destroy?
I thought it was pretty funny because a couple people I saw definitely on the floor in the GA, they would fall and the guys would just pop them and then, like lay on top of them to try to keep them for after.
Yes,
the show.
I know someone who did that.
So that's what Kevin's son did.
Yes.
And he just had a baby. So I'm like, what are you going to do with that, Jake? You going to take that on home to the wife and throw that in the nursery?
Were they just plain beach balls, or were they Metallica branded beach balls?
They were Metallica
Metallica
branded.
branded. Of course, I think
and they
who
were
wouldn't wanna keep
ginormous.
Yeah, they were 5 foot.
It took all of both Jake and I laying on it to get it deflated with 3 holes poked in it.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
So I haven't heard, like, what did your daughter-in-law feel? How did she feel about her gift coming back from your son that night?
Oh, I haven't seen her yet, but I think they're planning to like cut the logos out and do some sort of crafty arts hang on the wall type thing, something
like
along
your
those lines.
daughter-in-law. Sounds like her.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not sure if it's going in Callahan's nursery or in Jake's office, but
Excellent.
Maybe
Yeah.
he's going to have a latex like bib Metallica beach ball that's been embroidered or sewn together.
well, he doesn't need that because he already has a stand up and shout rock show onesie.
Of course. Of course. I mean, so like we get some like the kickback on the beach balls, right? Like, is that metal or not to like drop beach balls on the audience? Like, I've heard that too. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Feels very Taylor Swift.
right?
Yeah.
Right? And there's a little, but
Or very Katy Perry.
yeah. Yeah.
Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But I mean, and it's also during Seek and Destroy, which is an originating old school thrash song. And they drop beach balls there.
Yeah.
Who would've guessed?
I mean, they used to do it with just black ones with silver.
Right. I remember that.
That was Enter Sandman.
Yes.
Usually it was the very last song, where this is a couple of songs before the end.
Sure.
See, the move might have been to overinflate them, so during Seek and Destroy, when people hopped on them, they would just pop.
Or they would just bounce off.
Well, Kevin, we chewed up an hour. You want to keep going, or you want to? Because I can keep going. How are you guys feeling? We're shifting gears. We're going to go into a bottoms up. If you have time for a bottoms up, or we could save it for another show, I can go either way.
Let's roll.
Let's commit. All right, so we're going to shift gears. We're going to take another direction because I feel strongly about this topic because we should be selling sound or celebrate, not selling. I guess we're selling them in a way. Celebrating Soundgarden. We need to celebrate Soundgarden in a huge way because they scored the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction with that, which I think is miraculous. But the flip side to me, in terms of a tragedy, and there's a lot of tragedy behind this band, is that they're not touring.
Correct.
And I think that if Chris Cornell were alive, they would be touring.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And we would be seeing great Soundgarden music. And like we were just talking about Leper Messiah with Metallica, that caused me to go back and listen to that song a million times. And then I'd listen to Master of Puppets on top of that another million times. And that's the effect of a live show.
Yep.
And so I don't want Soundgarden to be like, kind of misrepresented on how important or how great their music is.
I agree. And, the big thing for me is because we did the whole what are the odds for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I felt very confident
You did.
that Soundgarden was going to get in.
I felt there was zero. I gave it a 0.
And we talked about it. I think a lot of it, in my opinion, had to do with the fact that Tom Morello and Dave Grohl are now on the panel.
Yep.
And we're in this, we got to make up for some missteps.
Yep.
And if there is a single band, we talked about the big four of thrash, of the bands that I would equate to the big four of grunge, no band was feeding the music that bands, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, bands that are already in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
Yep.
likely would not exist to the extent they did had it not been for Soundgarden.
Preach,
Soundgarden
brother.
paved the way
Preach.
for those guys, and an injustice has finally been rectified.
Nirvana gets the credit with Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Correct.
And that, to me, is like Quiet Riot getting the credit for glam metal with Metal Health. Or I'm sorry, Come On Feel the Noise on the album Metal Health. I don't think that's necessarily inaccurate. It's just not the whole story.
Right.
Right? Like, Quiet Riot did not invent glam metal, and there were a lot of strong bands playing at the time.
Right.
And they weren't the first. They didn't even come up. That's a cover song, ultimately for them. So they should absolutely get credit for having the first #1 glam metal song that changed the face of music at that time, whereas Nirvana should for Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Sure.
But Nirvana wouldn't be on the label that they were if it wasn't for all of the great music that Soundgarden put out before that.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, Sub Pop was a label that was created, and Soundgarden was one of the first bands that had music released on Sub Pop.
Absolutely.
Green River was the other one, which a couple of those guys ended up in Mother Love Bone and then Pearl Jam.
Yep.
But had Sub Pop not been created, I think some of these bands would have developed. But obviously, Bleach ended up getting released off Sub Pop
From Nirvana.
But Soundgarden already had stuff out
Several
for
albums.
a number of years before any of this started to happen. And and I think we'll get into it when we start talking about it.
Right.
There were 2 albums that were released within a month of each other. One of them being Nevermind, and the other one being Bad Motorfinger. That's what paved the way for mainstream grunge, I'll call it. That's when it blew up.
Right.
So,
and I am looking because there's I had to make sure I got the author's name right, because I just got finished a great biography on Chris Cornell, Total Fucking Godhead, by Corbin Reef, and a lot of that story that you were just putting out, he really goes into a lot of great detail to describe, and it's exactly that. Like, I think Chris Cornell was coined as the godfather of grunge at some point, in the mid '90s, and it's well deserved. It was not Kurt Cobain as the godfather of grunge.
Yeah. And those guys don't deny it. They all speak to what Soundgarden did in terms of influencing their career and their musicianship. So the bands from that era and from that area acknowledge it, but I don't know that everybody in the general public acknowledges that.
Exactly. And so I think this is going to be one of several conversations that we'll have this year to acknowledge Soundgarden and their induction in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which we can't wait to see.
Yes.
All right, but now we're going to talk about some of the more controversial things, albums versus singles, as we've talked about, like which one do you focus in? This is Soundgarden. We're going to talk albums. And we're doing it in our classic format of bottoms up. So we'll make recommendations for Soundgarden albums, and I'm going to be completely right about this. So listen to me. Kevin's going to have an opinion. You can do with that what you will, but when it comes to this band, I'm the guy. I know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to give you all those reasons why. Along with the albums, we're going to give you a single because I know there's playlist people out there. So preferred reasons why we chose at least one track off of these albums to add to your playlist. If you're not going to go and devote yourself to the album, but I highly recommend that you do.
All right.
So got my bottoms up picture. I have to spin that around. By the way, I did this picture on purpose. This is Soundgarden when I think that Ethan's going to throw it up, or maybe John. They're not throwing up, but they'll throw the picture up, for those that are watching on video. It is, you're talking about the eras of Soundgarden. Mm-hmm. This is their Bad Motorfinger era. And I'm going to be specific to this because a friend of ours listened to this show, and his name is Anders. And I'm just going to talk to him as Anders. And Anders fully believes that Matt Cameron, the drummer of Soundgarden, is actually the drummer of Pearl Jam. This picture clearly makes it known that Matt Cameron, his musical evolution really kind of came to fame with this band, and he later...
Does he even know who Matt Cameron is?
Yes, he does. Okay. And he gushes over Matt Cameron in Pearl Jam as their drummer. I'm like, Anders, he would even say to me, he's not Soundgarden's drummer. I'm like, dude, if Soundgarden was touring, Matt Cameron would be with Soundgarden. That's his original band.
Yes, because when they split up, that's when Matt Cameron went to Pearl Jam.
Yeah, and when they came back for King Animal, Matt Cameron came back. So it was clear where his loyalties lie. So, Anders, I did that picture for you, and you're wrong.
All right. What's at the bottom of the pile?
You want me to start at the bottom of the pile? I'm starting I by the way, I love this album. So I'm going to love every Soundgarden album that I throw at you. And it's King Animal. I think it's a really strong album. It is their latest album. It was after a 16-year hiatus, that the band came back together to do this album. I think it's really special that they did. It was 2012, I believe this album came out. So it just didn't have the same kind of experimentation or aggression that other Soundgarden albums have. Mm-hmm. And I would still say that it's not that that's missing. It's just not at the same level.
It's a little on the soft side.
A little on the soft side, I guess. It's like I just said aggression and experimentation. Kevin put it a little bit more strongly. So, but on the playlist for the song that I selected, that song is Black Saturday, and it's towards the end of the album. It wasn't released as a single. This is a mix, and people go here with Chris Cornell. Over his solo career, I feel that people really became attracted to a lot of his acoustic work, and it is wickedly solid. You should be. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be. But in terms of Soundgarden, there's not much acoustic work with Soundgarden, at least they're on their original studio albums. And so this is kind of a mix of that, where there's an acoustic track that really plays the full way through with a lot of electric instrumentation back behind it also for a really catchy and good rhythmic tune on Black Saturday.
Yeah, the last two albums had a good mix of songs that had acoustic with the electric mixed in.
Exactly.
But definitely not the early stuff.
Right.
So this is probably the one album we're going to agree on.
Oh,
because
wow. Right, yeah.
I have King Animal on my list at the bottom.
All right. So, and that's, by the way, so we're doing studio albums from Soundgarden, and we also threw in Temple of the Dog. Just so you know, don't be surprised if you
because that was a Soundgarden creation really and not a Pearl Jam creation.
Exactly. That launched the career of many in Pearl Jam, and so really it's Chris Cornell and his ode to Andrew Wood, his fellow musician, partner, and roommate. And really sad situation in losing him.
Right. So my track, and I feel that I don't have many of their singles. I think only a couple because I'm more fond of some of the deep tracks.
Sure, yeah.
Because a couple of these albums, everybody's going to know all the big stuff.
Right.
So hopefully you can find that. So I'm going to share some of my favorites that may not be, in the heavy rotation on Spotify.
Look, I think I've done that already with Black Saturday.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, yeah.
So for me, it's been away too long. It's the lead song. It was the first single that was released.
You just said all that.
I said this will be the one.
Okay, all right.
But
I was like, wait, what?
Nope.
All right.
So yeah, it was released as the first single, and
it's a good song though.
Yeah,
it's got a good groove too.
Yeah.
So excellent. I do think there's a lot. Soundgarden is not afraid to use weird time signatures in all of their songs, and that's a great example of something that's upbeat, but not in your just kind of regular going at it 4/4 common time.
Right.
Yeah, it's excellent.
All right. I'll go next.
All right.
So for me, next one I have on my list, Down on the Upside.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm surprised by that.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I'm not overly surprised by that. I can't necessarily say that out loud.
Well, I mean, when we get down to it, I'm going to irritate some people because I have my opinion of Soundgarden, and I don't give a shit what you think about it. Because,
But just remember when Kevin says that, remember who's right.
right.
All right. All right.
So, and my track is Ty Cobb.
Okay.
Which was also released as the 4th single on the album.
Yeah, but that's a cool song.
It's a fucking killer song. Love the guitar.
Yeah.
You know, Cornell is nailing it in that song, as he does with most. But yeah, it's just a hard driving, good tune.
Absolutely. So I'm almost there with you. I think I'm going to surprise a lot of people on this one. So my next one down, which I believe is we have 8 albums, or we have 7 albums, excuse me, with Temple of the Dog, is Super Unknown. And I mean, Super Unknown gets a lot of strong critical acclaim because most of the major singles that were popular singles have come off this album. But I feel like it's the most standardized, and for lack of better words, I would not say it's a pop sound, but there's the most pop sounding Soundgarden songs on this album. Not that that's bad, but I've always said that I feel like there's this unfair stereotype that Soundgarden was last in forming grunge in the Big Four and not one of the first. And it's because the singles off of this record, which came out in 1994, became popular after Smells Like Teen Spirit, which came out in 1992. And that's your Fell on Black Days. You know, that's your, oh my gosh, other slower tune. Like, why did it just pop out of my head? Fell on Black Days and, because I just saw like Suicide is sitting in front of me, which is kind of a slower tune, but
Black Hole Sun.
Black Hole Sun, of course. Like, how could I forget that? Covered by a lot of different acts. They're great songs. But if that's what you know of Soundgarden, you think of this as this just nothing but deeply somber band. And they're not that. There's a lot of diversity and complexity of their music that's not fairly, described by those songs. This, the song that I have on your playlist for this is Like Suicide. Which sounds like it's going to be a horror show, like horribly depressing. If you go to listen to that, like kind of in the place where, Chris Cornell wound up, that's how he ended his life. This is not a song about suicide, so it's not going to be overly, depressing in that way. It's really thematic towards, temptation and how that can be, a detrimental thing to you. So, and it is, again, more of an upbeat pace, too. So, very strong song. There's a lot of strong songs on this album, though, and there's no such thing as a bad Soundgarden album or song. Just, there's some that are just absolutely better. All right, you want me to go again?
Sure.
All right, because I'm going to where you just were, which is Down on the Upside.
Okay.
By the way, so, like, reading that book, Total Fucking Godhead, according to Corbin Reef, Chris Cornell's favorite album was Down on the Upside.
I could see that.
Yeah, like he loved this album, and it didn't receive the critical acclaim of Super Unknown, which I just talked about. And evidently that was very upsetting to him, and he didn't understand why it didn't receive some of the same recognition that Super Unknown did.
Well, and obviously this is where they started to fracture as a band. And I think, it also didn't have as many songs on the album that had really dark lyrical content. So when you consider everything that he was dealing with that we clearly didn't know about, that ultimately led to him unfortunately taking his own life, I could see him probably being a little bit more positive on that.
Right.
Since, I was one of the main lyricists, it seemed like it was a little bit more upbeat.
Right. There are hit singles off of this album, that are more upbeat, such as "Burden in My Hand."
Right.
So, and I think that's a great tune, but I picked a more of a deep track tune, "Overfloater," on this song. I think it's got like this spooky, almost like smoky club tone to it. That it's a haunting song, and again, not in a depressing way, but in a very spooky way, which is very just moody. And I think it really sets a strong tone, mood to it when you listen to it.
Yep. So for me, the next one I had, and this was tough, right? Because my love for Soundgarden started very early in their career because of working at the radio station at Virginia Tech.
You turned me on to Soundgarden. I'm eternally thankful for you turning me on to Soundgarden.
So it was very, very difficult because at one point I had this a little bit higher up in the list, but I couldn't argue with a couple of their more successful albums. So I have Ultra Mega OK.
Wow, I am stunned by
So
that.
yeah, I had them super high on the list, but
That's a huge drop.
it was, but it's like picking your most favorite child.
I get it. I
So
get
it's
it.
like, I could say it's 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D. But yeah, that's where I ended up pulling them for tonight. And, my track is All Your Lies. I mean, the stuff off the first two albums are just all killer from cover to cover. So it's heavy, Ultra Mega OK relative to the couple of EPs they released. This is where you see Chris Cornell's voice starting to come out.
Badass in Ultra Mega
And,
OK.
so it was, like I said, it was a tough decision.
Absolutely. All right, you want to keep going?
Sure.
All right.
So next up, I had Bad Motor Finger.
Oh, you're so wrong.
Hey, like I
I'm
said,
sorry. I'm so sorry, people.
I will be right in the end. So, and Slaves and Bulldozers for me.
What a bitchin' song,
Yeah,
man.
so
what
a little
bitchin' song.
bit more of a deep track. So obviously 91. So this came out 1 month after Nevermind was released.
Yep.
But neither of the two bands broke out and
No.
were well known until
Absolutely.
at least a whole year later.
Absolutely.
So,
Great point.
At the radio station, we were playing both of these, and particularly Louder Than Love, with a gigantic speaker that faced out into the media wing in the student event center. And everybody that walked by when either this song or anything off of Nevermind were playing were like, turn this shit off. This sucks. This sucks. And we're like, okay, whatever. And a year later, they're like, man, did you hear about this new band, Soundgarden? Keep walking. Keep walking.
All right, so I have Ultra Mega OK, and I love this, Kevin. Like we're getting into to me the solid, classic, badass Soundgarden albums.
Yep.
Ultra Mega OK is their first album, and I love it that you and I both have All Your Lies. I feel like this album really is like Soundgarden at their most punk. You know what I mean? In terms of like a straight punk approach, and All Your Lies is like a punk song to me. Probably one of their most hard hitting and up. Like you're a biking guy. Like this is a great fucking song to bike to. There's no doubt about it. Great song to run to. Great song to work out
Second song
to.
on the
It's
album
banging.
punches you right in the face.
Banging. So if getting away from like a more of an acousticy Black Saturday, and you needed the pump, go to All Your Lies off of Ultra Mega OK. But you brought up Bad Motor Finger, and so this is the question in my head. I don't know if you're kind of ready for the decision on this, and it really kind of leans towards Chris Cornell's best vocal performance on a Soundgarden song. And I go, like the debate that I usually hear is either Beyond the Wheel from Ultra Mega OK or Slaves and Bulldozers from Bad Motor Finger. Your song that you selected from Bad Motor Finger.
No, I think it's Slaves and Bulldozers. I mean, at that point, they were firing on all cylinders as a true grunge band. I know some people called them alternative metal.
Yeah.
Some, but that was between Louder Than Love and Bad Motor Finger. I think that was Chris Cornell vocally at his best.
Because I totally agree. Like if I had to choose between those two songs, and the pitch, that he's hitting and Beyond the Wheel might be higher, but the tone and the power in Slaves and Bulldozers is unbelievable. And evidently, that was the song that I've heard many talk about, including Tom Morello on his radio show, was the one that caught Rage Against the Machine's attention and brought him into Audioslave. So,
which, if you want to throw one of those songs in there, that's a different level too. But
getting to that, like, to me, when I talk to younger folk about Soundgarden, after, the emergence of Audioslave, I wonder about like the legacy of Soundgarden compared to Audioslave, because I know when I hear younger people listen to those two bands, they stick to Audioslave as opposed to Soundgarden.
Right.
And I can see it's a little bit more melodic, than Soundgarden. So not that Soundgarden's not melodic, they are, but I wonder about that. They kind of go back and Audioslave's a great super group, but are they as good as Soundgarden or Rage Against the Machine, which spawned those two bands that spawned that super group?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I know. That's a topic for another day. All right. So I'm at number 3. Went from number 4 to number 3. And at my number 3, that's where I have Temple of the Dog, which is a beautiful, beautiful requiem. And I'm hoping I'm saying that requiem. It is a definite, impassioned acknowledgement of Andrew Wood, the singer of Mother Love Bone. Anybody can get a hold of that on a streaming service where they can listen to Mother Love Bone. Would have probably been a big 4 grunge band if they would have stayed around, and we probably wouldn't have had Pearl Jam, right?
Oh, absolutely not.
Right. And so, we would know that band, and they would be on the map. And I have to go for your playlist now I'm going to a more popular song, which is Say Hello to Heaven, because it is such an amazingly, loving song devoted to someone that passed before their time. And it's just extremely moving. And that's why I hate the fact that in Chris Cornell's tribute, when he passed, Miley fucking Cyrus sang this song and sang it horribly. And so, I can't get over that. And please do not have something like that happen in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
So, number 3 for me was also Temple of the Dog.
Oh, nice. Oh, I know. Great song, by the way.
Yes.
It's the first thing I read.
I had initially Say Hello to Heaven. But then I was like, you know what? Four Walled World, the guitar solo at the end with Chris Cornell, his screaming and bellowing over the guitar solo.
Yes.
Is just, that was it. I'm
passionate.
It is, yeah. Passionate.
It's better than surreal.
Yes. So that would, and I was trying to find something that maybe was not as familiar to folks. Because everybody knows Say Hello to Heaven, Hunger Strike. But that's an amazing record too, because for, friends that kind of pulled together and did that, wrote and recorded that album pretty quickly. It was good stuff, but I think it was coming from, a sentimental place.
Absolutely. And Chris Cornell was very motivated to put this group of people together, which included Matt Cameron, by the way, before he was in Pearl Jam. I know I love Four Walled World, and another song that I feel like is like a jam song like that, which is also very emotional towards, is Reach Down. And I know that, I remember, that part of that biography that I just read, The Total Fucking Godhead, Corbin Reef, that he really pushed Mike McCready, evidently, to better himself in his soloing, probably for Four Walled World also, to go beyond what he was currently doing and really making it an impassioned solo. So I'm sure there was a lot of studio inspiration to come up with the vocals, and to push the boundaries of what they were doing musically to put an album like that together. So yes. Yep. Yeah. Good stuff.
All right. So at number 2, I had...
I know what you're... I was going to say, I know where you're going. I know what's left on your list because I totally know you. You have this at number 2, huh?
I do. And like I said, it was difficult because... what I have at number 1 and Bad Motorfinger, Super Unknown, are all great albums. This was the album that sort of put them over the top into mainstream.
It did.
So some people will say the Black Album is Metallica's best album.
Yes.
Even though they're wrong.
And that's why you're wrong about this one.
And if you look at all the other, there's a bunch of different ratings of the albums out there. Everybody has this album number 1, but I had it at number 2. And my track is My Wave.
That is a cool tune. And I'm glad you went with an upbeat track as opposed to the... Yeah. There's just too many downtrodden singles that have fallen off that album, which are not bad songs. Black Hole Sun is certainly a great song, and Fell on Black Days. I'm sure we're going to hear it at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. But again, it's not representative of the work that pushed the boundaries of music like Soundgarden did. in the early albums. So that's why I can't get there, Kevin. I can't get it that high.
Well, that's number 2.
All right. I mean, that was, you know what? That was almost number 7 for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. That almost like fell to the like very back end. I almost put King Animal above that one. But I hear you. Like it did bring Soundgarden into the mainstream. I don't know. But you know, you kind of went deep track, but then you put a mainstream album up top.
I know.
I'm very conflicted. I'm very confused. All right. So I have your number 1 as number 2. Which is Louder Than Love, which is a badass album. Look, there's like a stone's throw. I mean, a stone's throw between number 1 and number 2, where I'm going with this, because I think like these albums, if you listen to all of the albums and you wanna thumbs up the songs on the playlists, I have all of these thumbs upped. Like everything in Louder Than Love, everything in where I'm about to go next. And the single, just because I think it's just a cool rhythm to the tune, is Hands All Over. And by the way,
It's not the song I thought you were going to put on there.
Oh, you think Big Dumb Sex?
No.
Yeah, Louder Than Love?
But you always, anytime you talk about that album, you talk about Full On Kevin's Mom.
Well, I was going to get there. That was going to be my comedy like after this, because you can't deny Full On Kevin's Mom. But yeah, so like, but I'll say about this, like this is my claim to fame. I made the request to the 3 Chords in the Truth show by Duff McKagan, and they played this song for
Nice,
me.
okay.
I know, that was badass. It's another piece to it too. By the way, like this song has the lyrics, got my arms around baby brother, put your hands away, gonna kill your mother. They're not talking about killing people, all right? Like go a little deeper into the lyrics of that song. It's actually a very lovey kind of song. So don't go there. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna ruin the experience for you if you haven't heard it.
Okay,
All
go
right.
with your number 1.
My number 1, feeding off of that, this is one of my favorite albums of all time. And the single that I have on my playlist is one of my favorite singles, which I think is even harder to narrow down, of all time. Again, all songs on Bad Motorfinger 1991 are thumbs up. They should all be on your playlist. Rusty Cage kicks it off. It was released as a single. It does have a bitchin' video. Johnny Cash did cover it, but it's structured amazingly well. I love how the sirens of guitars bring you into the song, and it kicks up into a heavy tempo. And then as it rocks your face off, it brings you down into thick Sabbath-style sludge and brings you back up again. So congrats to Soundgarden for putting out this amazing album, and thank you so much, because I'll never stop listening to it.
Well, and just because it's your favorite album, that doesn't make it the best album.
It's the best.
Because number 1, without a doubt, is Louder Than Love.
Look, man, you're just wrong about Super Unknown. That's where you're misguided.
Yeah.
Because it would bump Bad Motorfinger back up.
Yeah.
Your list.
So this is the Soundgarden entry drug.
It is. That is
And,
true. Yeah. I don't know, maybe.
It's just every tune is raw, just passionate energy. And I like the fact that you brought up Sabbath, because I don't think they get enough credit for the Black Sabbath influences on the guitar playing. A lot of people say it's Zeppelin, and yeah, probably is a little, but the way that Kim Thale plays is very Sabbath-esque. So, and my song from my track is Gun.
Great song.
It's just hard driving. It's Soundgarden.
Got an idea of something we can do with a gun.
Yep.
Yeah. It's badass. Hard hitting, but look, if you want like a good time party tune off of that album, I'm going to go back to Full On Kevin's Mom, because why wouldn't it be? Who wouldn't be Full On Kevin's Mom?
Wouldn't Big Dumb Sex be a better party song?
I actually like Full On Kevin's Mom better. I want to go there. I'm surprised you didn't bring. I was expecting Big Dumb Sex from you on that, because I know how much you blasted that shit. Yeah, I mean that was like heard across the quad.
Yeah, well, it was it was a heavy rotation tune on the radio show too. So
yeah. So lessons learned here. Like I have the correct list. I have the accurate list. We can actually rebroadcast that on socials if you need to see it again. You can go to any radio station and hear Super Unknown and hear Black Hole Sun, and Kevin has that at number 2. So I clearly am like really kind of more in tune to this topic And you're welcome for guiding you in the right direction.
They'll be waiting for your pee test on the way out.
Ethan, you know any Soundgarden?
I do know some Soundgarden.
Do you know Black Hole Sun?
Of course.
All right. Do you know Full on Kevin's Mom?
I do not know Full on Kevin's Mom.
You got to experience that
Not
tonight.
yet, I don't.
Uh-huh. There's also like, and I think it's back to back. You have a little Get on the Snake. Like following that up.
Yep.
So there's clear messaging.
I think they were very sexually repressed at that time in their careers. There were not enough groupies around.
Ethan, did you know they were going in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I know John knows because he was here when we were talking about all that a couple months ago, or at least he should have if he was awake.
I did hear about it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge for us. Giant, right? Like there's a rock band going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Finally.
I know.
So, we've corrected one wrong in the alternative music category
I know.
in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yes.
And the next one that has to be corrected is this one.
Absolutely. Jane's Addiction needs to be there. There's no doubt about it. No question. And that was getting to Taylor Hawkins. That was one of his last things that he said in the Foo Fighters induction. 3 people need to be here. You have 2 of the 3 now. It was George Michael, which was kind of surprising, and then Soundgarden and Jane's Addiction.
Yep.
Yeah. So Taylor was right. I'll even support George Michael on that one if I can get Soundgarden and Jane's Addiction in.
So I think that's wrapping us up, right?
That's wrapping us up. So we got some shows coming at the Salisbury Center.
We do.
Yeah.
This next Friday, June the 13th, we got Bliss.
Yeah.
So that's Nirvana.
That's Nirvana.
Nirvana tribute band. The Siamese Dreamers.
Smashing Pumpkins.
And some band First Try.
First Try. All 90s for those wondering.
And then the following Friday, we already talked about this a little bit, but our friends in Spread Eagle, you got to get out here and see them.
Hell yeah.
They put on a great live show.
Can't wait for that.
Yep. With support from American Dream Machine and Silver Tongue.
Which, by the way, they were really kind of penned to be a headlining act here. And so in that way, in other words, they're quality acts that are all really kind of tripled together for the Spread Eagle show.
Yeah. So it should be a great night of music. Both of those nights.
Yeah.
And then also down the road, we talked to Zach Bowling on our previous show from the Native How.
Yep.
And they'll be here on June 17th performing at Metallica Leesburg. So get out and check those guys. If you missed that interview, it's up on our socials. And by all means, you can get your Stand Up and Shout Rock Show t-shirt.
Got to do it,
at
man.
getwild.com/stand up and shout.
Get GETWYLD.
Coming in November.
I know, so I just saw that. I saw that before I walked in here. And we're doing Zach Sabbath again. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, we ambushed the ending last time. It looks like John might be ready to go this time around. Maybe. Did you know we were closing? All right.
All right. Thanks.
I tend not to ask that if you know whether or not I'm closing.
Thanks for tuning in.
I'll just cut right to
He just cut you off.
Maybe not. I feel like we're back there again.
Yeah.